if he orders anything, to order a statewide manual recount of all the undervotes and overvotes in the state of Florida?
I believe so.
Is that a concern of yours?
It would be a strong concern of mine.
And would you tell the court why?
Because in order to have a fair and accurate count of the votes, you have to consider everybody's votes and not just selected counties where they may have a strong Democratic outcome.
Thank you,
Any inquiry? Does anyone wish to inquire? If not, thank you, Ms. Seymour. You may stand down and be excused. All right, at this time then, I believe that that is everyone except the case will now go to the plaintiff for rebuttal. Yes, sir.
If I could interrupt for a moment. Robert Zane on behalf of Speaker Thrasher.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to be forgotten. You recall on Friday we filed a motion to intervene, a motion to dismiss, and Mr. Beckman on behalf of Governor Bush and I discussed with you at some appropriate time during the hearing that we would have hearing on the dispositive motion to dismiss.
You would be entitled on the intervention to present in the final arguments, whatever it is. I suppose we'll take up I suppose the issues of your motion to dismiss is my recollection, but not in the context of this proceeding.
Yes, sir. We don't wish to put on any evidence. We wish to just have the argument at the appropriate time. The final argument is the appropriate time.
Well, let me finish with this case, and then I suppose if we need to do that, then we'll have a hearing on your motion to dismiss as soon as I can take all the evidence in this case. But right now, let me ask if the plaintiffs, Mr. Clavin.
Your Honor kindly allowed Judicial Watch to appear as an observer the other day. You raised the possibility that our witness, Kevin Haggerty of the CPA firm Johnson and Landworth, might want to be called by one of the witnesses or the court. We simply proffered him. We did file a motion to take judicial notice of independent expert's report and for leave to present testimony. If the party or the court would like him as a witness, he did make certain observations with regard to the vote in Palm Beach when we did that inspection earlier in the week. We just wanted to make him available for the court or the parties.
All right. Well, I didn't know. That's the reason I had left it up to you and the parties as to whether or not anyone wished to utilize any of the information that was available, and apparently neither of the existing sides have done so.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Case will go to the plaintiffs for rebuttal. Call the first witness if you have.
The court.
Yes, sir.
We would first offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 61, which is a stipulation that we've entered into, and I think we offer this without objection.
Signed by, all right, by Mr. Berger, Mr. Greenberg, and Mr. Beck. I believe that's all the parties. Mr. Clark.
Our feelings aren't hurt, Judge.
Yes, sir. Let's see.
Fine,
Just
No objection.
sign on the bottom.
Our next witness is going to be Professor Hangarten. Perhaps you could approach the stand.
Yes, sir. Ask him to come forward. All right, the professor's been previously sworn, remains under oath. You may proceed.
Professor Hangarten, you have not been here while the testimony was going on after you left. Is that correct?
Yes, I have been away.
I'm going to ask you some hypothetical questions drawn from that testimony. First, there was some testimony, I ask you to assume, about a person who said that they voted in precinct 626 in Miami-Dade. And there was a question about undervoting in that precinct. From your review of the records, were there any undervotes in that precinct?
I have been told that there were no undervotes in that precinct, and I expect to have delivered in this courtroom.
Hold on. Okay. He's got an objection to the form of the question, or he's been told. You have to straighten that out.
Have you personally reviewed the statistics by precinct of the undervotes in Miami-Dade County?
Yes, I have.
And do I take it from your answer that you were checking on whether or not there were undervotes and how many there were in 626 because you didn't have that number in your mind?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to, sir.
And did you ask somebody to check that by looking at the figures?
Yes, I did.
And as an expert, do you frequently rely on people to check figures for you?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I'd like to object.
Do you wish to take the witness on board there?
Well, Your Honor, my objection is that the rebuttal case is not to rehabilitate your witness that has been impeached. The purpose is to rebut. This isn't a rebuttal, it's a rehabilitation.
Your Honor, this has nothing to do with rehabilitation.
He's directed this to other testimony today concerning precinct 626, as I understand it.
But, Your Honor,
That's exactly right, Your Honor.
being introduced for the purpose of proving whether or not there was an undervote in 626. That is not the province of an expert. If he wants to prove that there were no undervotes in 626, he has to do it some other way.
All right, I'll overrule the objection. You may proceed. Hand me the tally.
Were there any undervotes in precinct 626, sir?
There were none.
The second subject. I ask you to assume that there was testimony that in the Miami-Dade precincts that had not been subject to a manual recount, that is the so-called 9,000 votes that have not been manually counted, that the total vote for President Bush, or Governor Bush, and not President Gore, Vice President Gore. Let me start over again. I've got two presidents here, and in fact we have none so far. I ask you to assume that there was testimony that with respect to the precincts from which those 9,000 uncounted or manually uncounted ballots come from in Miami-Dade were precincts that in total, in the aggregate, gave more votes to Governor Bush than to Vice President Gore. Does that tell you anything about which of those two candidates is most likely to get votes if those ballots were counted?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Same grounds we've stated before. Any basis of selecting the president or any other candidate on statistical data we object to. The only evidence that is relevant is something that goes to something that to do with statewide figures, not on a county basis, Your Honor. We're not electing the county supervisor.
Note your objection. Would you restate the question?
Yes. I ask you to assume, Professor Hangarten, that there was testimony put forward by the defendants in this case that if you took all of the Miami-Dade precincts that had not been subject to a manual count, that Governor Bush would have gotten more votes from the machine count in those precincts in the aggregate than Vice President Gore. You have that assumption?
Yes.
If that were true, would that have anything at all to do with the statistical likelihood that Governor Bush would in fact get more votes from those 9,000 ballots if they were counted?
No, it doesn't.
Why not?
Because it depends on how the undervote, the distribution of the number of undervotes in each precinct is related to the proportion of Democrats and Republicans, at least as measured by the machine count.
And did you look at that?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
There seems to be some association between number of undervotes and the political persuasion of the counties. In particular, there seems to be more undervote in Democratic precincts, not counties, precincts.
When you say Democratic precincts, are you talking about precincts in which there is a registration majority of Democrats, or are you talking about this particular election?
I'm using majority as a precinct, I say Democratic precinct, if the precinct has more machine-counted votes for Vice President Gore than for Governor Bush.
And that is more machine-counted votes in this last election?
Yes, sir.
And using Democratic precincts in that way, that is, a precinct that returned a majority of votes for Vice President Gore in this last election, where are most of the undervotes that have not yet been counted?
That would be in the Democratic counties, sir.
Democratic counties or Democratic precincts?
Precincts. I'm sorry,
That's okay.
we're talking about precincts.
Okay. No more questions, Your Honor.
Beck?
Good evening, Professor.
Good evening.
Are you aware that of the statistical approach that was taken by the Gore-Lieberman legal team in the concerning the undervotes in Miami, the position taken in their complaint?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope.
We're talking about the computation of the projection of undervotes in Miami based on the undercount. I thought that was one of the two subjects that was in the...
What we were talking about is exactly what we went through. It was not a projection from the complaint. It was direct response to the witness they put on.
All right. Any objection? Rephrase.
Oh, okay. Mr. Boyes was asking you about improper methods to project the undervote for all of Miami based on the undervote total for the 20% that was manually recounted. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
And he was asking you about the significance of whether a particular precinct is a Democratic precinct or a Republican precinct, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, and you said that one of the things you have to take into account is that I think you said that there tend to be somewhat more undervotes in Democratic precincts than in Republican precincts, right?
Yes, sir.
But you still have to take into account whether the precincts are Republican or Democrat, don't you?
Yes, sir.
So that if some lawyer writes a complaint that says 20% of the ballots have been, of the undervotes have been manually reviewed, and they all come from heavily Democratic precincts, and then they say, and the way that you can project the total for the county is just to project that out times 5 to get 100%, that's just flat wrong from a statistical point of view, isn't it, Professor?
Objection, Your Honor. Back to the complaint, which you already have ruled out.
Your Honor, he opened the...
Rule. You've asked him about this.
That approach is just plain flat wrong from a statistical point of view, isn't it, Professor?
That is, taking the number of votes or the difference of votes and just multiply that by 5, because that's the calculation you're asking me?
Yes.
It is not an accurate prediction.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? May the professor stand down and be excused. Without objection. Thank you. All right, call the next witness.
We have no more witnesses, and we rest, Your Honor.
All right. At this time, what is your pleasure? Do you wish to proceed at this time with your closings?